Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. After the payrolls, lots going on. Quite a lot to talk about today. So if it's the first of these that you've attended, just to explain how it works, we'll take a look at the major events for next week. I mean, this week's had lots of events, but there's quite a bit to watch next week. Then we'll jump onto the charts, have a look at the usual major markets, indices, commodities, oil, some currencies, Bitcoin, all the usual stuff. See where the opportunities might be in the days ahead. And then we'll have a look at any stuff you want looking at. So if there's any markets you want looking at, just put it in the chat, in the YouTube chat, while this thing is going out live. So we had the payrolls an hour ago. It was an hour ago, wasn't it? So it's the US jobs data. The market expectations were for 160,000 jobs to be added in December, and the number came in at 256,000. So we've seen quite some moves because it shows, using that as a barometer, the US economy is perhaps stronger than some people thought. So perhaps that affects how the US Fed will act on interest rates next year. The dollar has had a bit of a surge. It's come back a bit. I am long the dollar, so that's good for me. That's had a bit of a surge. That hit a fresh 2-year plus high, that one, which means the pound has slipped again. Obviously, the UK has been in the news quite a bit this week. We'll talk about that as well and look at gilt markets. S&P 500 is also down on the news, so stock markets are down on the news. Personally, I would be a buyer of that dip, but more about that when we get into things. So, a lot going on. Oil, I'm long oil as well from the other week, so that's good. That trend in oil has been very nice since before Christmas. So that's it, a 3-month high today. So lots of moves after, I think in last week's live stream, I was perhaps complaining that it was been a bit of a sluggish few weeks, but things have definitely woken up. Anyway, so we'll look at all this stuff in a bit more detail in a sec. Let's just get the housekeeping done. Just do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay, that's that done. So next week, it's quite a big week next week again. I mean, this week we had the US Fed minutes. That didn't cause that much volatility actually on Wednesday night UK time. Thursday, yesterday, US markets were shut for President Carter's funeral. So they've just opened again just now officially. I mean, they were trading in the 24-hour market, but official trading in the US has just started. So it could be an interesting day after this non-farm payroll stuff. So anyway, next week, Tuesday, US PPI, Producer Price Index on Tuesday. Could be a big one. Wednesday's a big day though, I think. UK inflation. So what does consumer price inflation look like in the UK? And later on the same day, US inflation. And clearly, of course, inflation very much feeds into the possible future direction of interest rates, how aggressive central banks might be in cutting or not, and all of that. So Wednesday's a big day next week. And on Friday, China GDP. So the Chinese economy, how well or not is it doing? So that's it. So it's been an interesting year. I've done 3 trades so far this year. I've been long sterling yen. I got stopped out of that for a small profit earlier this week when the pound nosedived. And I've been long the dollar and long oil, and I still am. I did a video this week. If you haven't seen it, I think it's well worth watching. It's had a bit more traction, but commodity markets. Maybe 5 years ago, I did a lot more longer term trading than I've done the last couple of years, and I'm going to get back into doing more longer term trading this year. And there's some really interesting stuff going on in commodity markets. And with some of these markets, I saw it a few years ago, if we see the price of commodities increase, then clearly that is going to feed into inflation. So there are some interesting markets. I looked at a whole load in that video this week. It is 17 minutes long. So if you haven't seen it, I think there's some interesting stuff in there. I think commodities are always a bit of an odd one, perhaps for some people, because it's it's not as mainstream as the S&P, the Nasdaq, pound against the dollar, and all of that. But yeah, have a look at that. I think we'll have a look at maybe a couple today as well and see what's going on. But I think it could be an interesting year for commodities, one way or the other. And I'm doing a webinar about longer term trading next Thursday evening, UK time. But I will talk about that a bit later on to give you a bit of a taster. 7 o'clock next Wednesday. I run a WhatsApp group, so I'm running it for the WhatsApp group. If you want to attend, I'll tell you how to in a minute, or after we've looked at some markets. But the benefits of longer term position trading, I think when it comes to trading, it is probably the potential better return for the least amount of stress and hassle. So there's that. What to look for, the sort of things I look for, some of the setups, how to manage risk, always important, of course. Just because it's long term doesn't mean we don't manage the risk. Riding the trend, if you have a look at that commodities video I did earlier in the week, if you haven't seen it, I talk about palladium in 2018 and 2019, which was massive winning market for me. So really important to ride that trend, adding to positions as the thing moves in your favour, and how to start doing it. So that's next Thursday's webinar. I'm really looking forward to doing more longer term stuff this year. I still do the short term stuff, but there were some great trends last year in various markets. Even gold was up 27% last year. Orange juice was up a bucket load. Cocoa was up a bucket load, nearly tripled into April, May last year. So all sorts of reasons to do it. So I'll do this webinar next week. So there we go, blah, blah. We'll come back to that though. For now, let's take a look at some markets. So let's start off as usual with US stocks. The S&P 500, the broader US stock market. Oh my God, it's been dull. It's one of my favourite markets, but it's not done much since the US election. We had obviously the surge after the election when Mr. Trump won the election, sold off, quite a good trend there. But if you look at it now, over the last 2 months, it's all a bit sideways, isn't it? So nothing too exciting there. I would be a buyer of this dip though, this dip that we've seen after the payrolls. So I think it could be an interesting day today. I think for me, if I was a buyer today, then I'd be thinking about stops under, perhaps these levels before Christmas on the S&P, the lows before Christmas. So let's see. Oh, palladium's up today. We'll have a look at that in a sec then. So blah, blah, blah. But the big trend is up. It's clearly in stock markets, the big trend is still up. So for me, from a long-term trend following point of view, I want to be a buyer of stocks. It's just been a boring couple of months or so. There's the Nasdaq. So again, the Nasdaq, you can see these lows from early December and early Jan as well. 20,800 or thereabouts on the Nasdaq 100. So yeah, I think it could be an interesting afternoon. Dow has been knocked down 250 points. There's the level on the Dow. That's a big level on the Dow, isn't it? So 41.6, which is 700 points below where we are now, and about 42,000, which is 300 points below where we are now. So maybe an interesting afternoon. Let's see what happens. But it has been, like I say, a dull, for me anyway, a dull few weeks in stock market indices. So there's that. US indices maybe start to come back to life a little bit. What else is moving? The DAX is the German index, is not so far away from the old all-time high. Obviously, the big trend is up here as well, going back to October 2022. Oh, what am I trying to say? It's so interesting to see next week. Do we see a bit more strength? Do we see the DAX take out the old all-time high? It's only 230 or so points away from where it is now. So that'll be one to see next week. The FTSE did have a bit of a run this week on that pound weakness. We'll take a look at the pound in a second. But again, the FTSE, pretty boring market going back to May. I did trade it back here in November. Now that is probably one of the only trades I did on the FTSE last year. I think for me, when there are markets that have clear trends, I don't want to battle this sideways chop in the FTSE. So no real change there. One I mentioned in the WhatsApp group this morning, mamma mia, it's the Italian index nearly at all-time highs again. Sneaked up. So that could be interesting as well, you know, considering that a lot of these US markets have been boring, European markets have been a bit side to side, the Italians have sneaked up there. So 35,500 or thereabouts on the Italian 40. Let's see what happens. Do we get a breakout in the Italian market? Of course, if you weren't convinced by the strength, it's the perfect opportunity to go short. You know, it was an interesting year last year for the Italian index. In the first sort of 4 months or so, there was a really good trend. And then it did nothing, you know, for 8 months. Bang, bang, bang. Kept banging up against these levels. Couldn't get through. And all a bit side to side. So let's see. Let's see what happens. But that's an interesting one to watch next week. Japan market, I don't think there's a lot going on there still. Still a bit side to side. Not too much for me there. Hong Kong, I always wonder, Hong Kong and China, you know, we had those crazy moves. I think that was it sparked by government intervention, September, October last year. But the trend for these markets, you know, a recovery trend last year compared to the downtrend we'd had for quite a few years in Hong Kong, Hang Seng this is, and China. I'd always wonder, is this going to be a year where we see further recovery? So that might be a bit more of a long-term buy for me. China index looks pretty similar as well, or not quite similar, but there we go. So that's it. So stock markets starting to get a bit more interesting again, maybe. Interesting to see how these US markets fare this afternoon. For now, at least, assuming dip stops dipping, and I still want to wait a bit, I think, for these US markets. But interesting to see if we get a bit of a bounce back this afternoon. So that's that. So lots to watch in US markets. The dollar index. So I've been long the dollar index for, I think, about a couple of weeks now, because the trend has been up. You know, the trend has been up since October. So I bought in here somewhere. It was so beginning of last week. Interesting year, of course, with Mr. Trump coming in as the president. Not long to go till he gets inaugurated. It's at 2 year highs, 2 and a bit year highs, the dollar index. That's what the trend looks like since October. If I was going to be bullish on the dollar index, I'd say, well, ultimately the target is perhaps a run back to the September 22 highs up around 114. So another 450 points from here. Let's see. I think it'd be an interesting year, though. Clearly, you know, a lot could go wrong with the US economy, and a lot could go right. You know, so there we go. That's true. Sitting on the fence position, isn't it? But for now, I'm long the dollar. A lot of strength there. Let's see. Let's see what happens. Now, pound against the dollar. I think we've got to look at that, considering the woes for the UK at the moment. But really, you know, it's a great media story with gilt yields and everything else, and we'll look at yields as well. But the pound's going down against the dollar. The euro is going down against the dollar. Everything's going down, you know. So the move this week in the pound, oh my God, the pound hits a 12-month low against the dollar. It's just continuing this trend that's been in place since October, you know. So it's not as if it's been going up for years and suddenly it's completely reversed. But it is weak. I thought there was a chance of a bounce. There had a little bounce, but not so far. I think it's going to be really interesting over the next week for pound against the dollar, the next week or so, or let's say the rest of January. Because these old lows from 2023, October 23, let's call it 120. Let's round it up to 120. So 250 points from where we are now. Do we see the buyers come back in? You know, and I am tempted to say we will, but let's see what happens. You know, 118 to 120 were big levels for the pound. Those are the 2023 lows early on in 23 and a bit later on as well. So I think that's interesting, but absolutely still weak as of today. Pound against the old US dollar. Still weak there. Euro dollar, like I said, still weak as well. Nice downtrend in euro dollar. You know, there's quite a lot of fresh air on the euro. Maybe 102, maybe parity is always a level to watch, the 1-to-1 level. But for now, obviously with the dollar strength, and the dollar absolutely helped by those payrolls today, these other currencies under a little bit of pressure. So I was long sterling yen. Let me talk about that. I got stopped out of that for a small profit in the end. So I bought sterling yen somewhere, can't remember where, in here somewhere I think, rode it up a bit, wondered if it braked out. All that stuff happened early this week, so I got stopped out for a profit. I could be tempted to be a buyer of sterling yen again, actually, if the dip stops, because that was a good trend. But for now, it is a bit a bit too weak for me. It's quite interesting though that actually if you pick up, or if I pick up on the summer lows on sterling yen, that's not a brilliant trend. Whatever. Let's see. Let's see what happens with that one as well. So that's that. Let's take a look at Bitcoin quickly as we're on the old currencies thing. Bitcoins have been a bit sort of chopper armor as well, but 90 to 92, that sort of zone, going back to November, late November. You know, that's where the buyers are coming in. You know, so for me, that's interesting. You know, if I wanted to be a buyer of Bitcoin, then buying the dips looks interesting. I think for me, the next big support is perhaps down around 85. So if I was a buyer now at 94, I'd have a stop the other side of 85. The big trend is up, obviously on Bitcoin. You know, going back to November 22, the trend's accelerated since then. So blah blah, big trend still up. So yeah, so I'd still be a buyer on Bitcoin, even though it's all a bit sideways over the last whatever we want to have a look at. But interesting market there as well. Let's have a look at these gilt markets, these bond markets. Now, I'm not an expert in bonds by any stretch of the imagination. You know, it's just a market like any other. But this is UK gilts. This is the price of UK gilts. When the price of the gilts falls, the yield goes up. So, of course, we've had all that news this week about UK government borrowing, highest since whenever. I don't know when it was, 2008 or 1998, whatever. But, you know, again, the big trend in gilts has been down since August 2020, since post-COVID. So we're 4 years into that downtrend. It had built a base, October 22. I think that was the Liz Truss, for those of us in the UK. I remember that glorious period of politics we had. Came back to it in October 23. Or was she October 23? When was Liz Truss Prime Minister? I mean, it's sort of blink and you miss it, isn't it? 2022. There we go. So that was the Liz Truss lows. And then we came back to it again last year. They held, saw a good rally, and it's basically gone sailing through it this week. UK gilts have gone through that level this week. I think an aggressive trade here. I mentioned it in the WhatsApp group. You know, it's absolutely made sort of more mainstream news what's going on in the gilt market this week. It looks like it's moved off the front pages at the moment. Just having a quick look. Oh, here we go. So there's a bit. There's the Times. So talking about the cold snap, Trump sentencing, and Labour grumbles about Reeves. So there's a bit of what's going on with the Chancellor still on the front page of the Times. When these sort of markets that aren't talked about every day, e.g. gilts, starts hitting the front pages, it means clearly we've had quite an extreme move, but it can often signal the end of the extreme move. So I was thinking maybe there's going to be a bit of a reversal in these markets. Technically the trend is absolutely still down. So it's a braver man than me who jumps in, but it's always quite interesting, you know. So an aggressive trade in gilts would be to be a buyer with a stop under yesterday's low, which on my chart is about 89. So there we go. That's that. Interesting market. But also, it's not just UK bonds that are falling. You know, if you look at the old Americans, UST bonds, there we go. Not as drastic as the UK gilts, but UST bonds earlier this week broke below the 2024 lows. So they today have hit their lowest since November 23. Interesting to see if the old lows held. And again, the US government bond has been falling since 2020. These are really interesting markets. Now, I do like the bond markets. These are really interesting markets to trade, and you do get good trends. And finally, EU bonds. So there's the European bond. And again, big slides since 2019, 2020. Great run on the way up as well. But bang, all the way back down again. So again, EU bonds haven't quite taken out not even November lows yet. So that's interesting. So the European bonds not getting hit as hard. But yeah, there we go. Interesting stuff, I think, given all the news this week. So that's the bond markets. Let's see. Has the market overshot? Let's see. Let's see what next week brings. And of course, that UK inflation data next week on Wednesday may well have a bearing on what goes on in the gilt markets. So interesting to watch that. So yeah, much more interesting this week than it has been for ages. So there's that. What else are we going to talk about? Silver and gold. Gold I mean, gold again. I mean, the big trend on gold is up. Like I said, 27% last year. I think the gold price did, which outperformed my own favourite, the S&P. So great performance last year for gold. Again, a little bit side to side over the last couple of months, but once again, the big trend is up. I buy the dip. I don't know if I buy it here, but I buy a dip. 2720, 2,720 has been a problem. I've just seen that question. How will markets react to Trump's invasion of Greenland? I don't know. So we wait and see if it happens first. But it's a fair question. Don't know. They'll probably go through the roof, won't they? Let's see. What are we talking about? Gold. So gold, 2720, 2,720 has been a bit of a ceiling last time. So it's had a really good run, or a good run this year, so far. It's up about $60 for the year so far, so 3%. But a bit side to side overall. But again, big trend is up on gold. Silver, what's silver doing? I mean, silver, it's an odd market, silver, isn't it? But, I would buy the dip on silver. I think that I said that last week, that I'd buy the dip on silver. And it's just about where would I put my stop? Maybe, I don't know, the other side of $26, the other side of $27.70, something like that. It's a strange one, silver, isn't it? It has these moments, these flashes of strength, and then it just dies a death again. So, but I'd say positive overall silver. So that's that. Oil, I'm long oil. It's done really well, oil. Could trade that. I wasn't sure when I was putting that trade on, but I thought, come on, the trend's up. Got to be a good trend follower and go with the trend. So here we are. So oil's touched 78 today. And what was the low in December? 67. It's a big old move, isn't it? I mean, what's that? 15%, 16% move? Anyway, so it's been an interesting trend over the last month. It doesn't really change the big picture for oil, though. Oil last year, US crude oil, was up 1% on the year last year. It was a really dull year for the price of oil. I doubt this year will be dull, one way or the other. But this has been an important base. I think I talked about it in that commodities video. So it was 62 to 65. Going back to 2021 has been a base for oil. So we have seen a bit of a rally. Let's see, does it crack 80? I hope so for my trade. But the next hurdle, October highs at 79 for me. So for me, going into next week, I'd absolutely still be a buyer of the dip on oil. 72, 73 has been good support over the last couple of weeks or so. So that's been a nice trend, that. I've enjoyed that. That's been good. Natural gas, I should have traded natural gas, but I didn't. But natural gas has had a good trend as well. I mean, there's the hourlies on natural gas. With the usual proviso, the natural gas is a crazy market quite often. But this has been a good trend since early November. So we're 2 and a bit months into that trend. Pulled back. I did mention it in the WhatsApp group a couple of times. Didn't actually do it myself. Like a dingus. But pulled back and off we go again. I saw there was news today, isn't it? It's the classic British news, isn't it? Cold snap leaves Britain with less than a week's worth of gas. So we've got no natural gas, apparently. We've got a week's worth of supply. So it's not a week to save the NHS this week. It's a week to save the natural gas supplies. So, but I mean, what's helping the price of natural gas, or what has helped it in recent weeks, has been the forecast of, cold weather in various bits around the world. Let's see. But it's interesting from a longer term point of view. I talked about it in the what's it video, that commodities video I did. That it was a big breakout last year for natural gas. Natural gas was pretty much sideways for all of last year in the great scheme of things, but we did get this break in December. So with a couple of weeks left for the year, broke. That's a big break, and that would be, so I think it would be interesting. So from a more longer term point of view, the things I'll talk about in the webinar on Thursday, I'd have to be a buyer of natural gas this year at the moment. So I think that could be an interesting market. So yeah, that's it. There's loads, isn't there? And what's live cattle doing? I should have bought that as well. It's only up a bit, but live cattle. So to talk about one commodity, live cattle's interesting. Again, this has been a popular one in the WhatsApp group, but great. I mean, I've traded it before. And ultimately, I don't know anything about the price of cattle. I know what a cow looks like, but I don't know really about the fundamentals of the live cattle market. But a great trend, traded like any in the market. Great trends into August 23. Then all a bit sideways last year, kept banging its head, couldn't get through. And then we had this breakout in December, pull back and bang. Off to the moon, as you might say, about live cattle. But an interesting market. I haven't bought it. I'd like to, hopefully there'll be a dip next week and I might buy it then. But yeah, that was interesting. So there's lots going on, I think it has definitely felt to me the last few weeks, perhaps after once the election sort of excitement had died down, that it all got a bit boring. But it certainly got livelier again this week. So for next week, what to watch? I mean, there's a whole load of stuff. For me, US stocks, it looks like they're still sliding a bit today. Yes, they are. So that's an interesting afternoon for US stocks. Still weak. Are we going to get the bounce? Let's see what happens there. Gilts and bonds, because of course they're all over the news. So I think that's interesting. Has it overshot? I don't know. Let's see what happens. The dollar, because it's at this 2+ year high. That's interesting. Oil, because it's had a real good run. Where does that go next week? Absolutely loads to look at. So yeah, that's it. Lots going on. So we'll see. So what we'll do now, we'll take a look at the stuff you want looking at. Someone's put diamond in. Is there a diamonds index? Is that what you mean? If you mean the diamonds index, we can have a look at that. I don't think there's actually a diamond market. So if I've got the wrong end of the stick there, if you want to explain what you mean, and we'll have a look at it in a sec. So I'm doing this webinar next week. I do a webinar every month for the WhatsApp group, the people who sign up to the WhatsApp group. And it's longer term trading. I did lots of longer term trading up until 2022. Then I focused more on short term trading because I wrote a course on short term trading. So I wanted to show it worked. I want to get back, as well as the short term stuff, into the more longer term stuff this week. I'm going to do exactly the same approach I did a few years ago that had worked for years. I'm talking about it in a webinar next Thursday night, 7 o'clock. If you can't make it live, if you qualify to come for the webinar, I'll send you the recording. But the benefits of long-term position trading, what to look for, managing risk, riding the trend, adding to positions, how to start. Because I think when it comes to trading, most people start off really short term, most people lose. Those two facts are related. Okay, people come into trading and think it's all about where does the price of oil go. This is a 1 minute chart of oil. Where does the price of oil go in the next half an hour? 50% of trades are closed out within the first hour of being opened. Can you believe that? I worked in the industry for 20 years and I still struggle to believe that. I mean, my oil trade and my dollar index trade, I've been in them for like nearly 2 weeks and they're making good profits now. The idea of getting out in the first hour is absolutely ridiculous. But this is what a lot of people do. And this is why a lot of people lose, because they're too short term. So we'll talk about this longer term approach on next Thursday. If you want to join it, you can either join the WhatsApp group, and with the WhatsApp group, you get a daily update from me in the morning, and then an update in the afternoon when the US market opens, markets I'm watching, trades I'm running, Q&A. If you use the code YouTube, you can get 20% off the first month subscription. You only have to subscribe month to month, so you can make sure you join the webinar that way, and that way you'll still have a month's worth of updates from me. There are people in the WhatsApp group who've been in there for more than 12 months. Most people stay in for quite some time. I think the average is about 8 months. So yeah, try that. The link to join is in the description. Go to the website davidjonestrading.co.uk or open an account with my preferred broker, who I've been trading with for 2 years. bit.ly/DavidTrade to go and open an account with them. The link again is in the description. Drop me an email when you've done that, and I'll make sure you're added to the list. So my email address is dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. That's the website as well. So do one of those things, either join the WhatsApp group or open an account, and I will make sure you are on the webinar next week. And I do know what I'm talking about. I hope you realise by now. I don't have all the answers, and I'm not one of these YouTube trading con artists who says you're going to double your money in the next 3 weeks. I try and have a realistic, pragmatic view to it. But I absolutely do think, for most people, me included, longer term trading is a much better way of trading. And it's much less grief. You can get on with your life and not have to worry about what the Nasdaq's doing every couple of hours. Anyway, that's next Thursday. Let's take a look at the stuff you want looking at. So what have we got? Palladium, which is saying Palladium's up 4% today. It's been a bit of a boring market for me, Palladium. Let's see if things are changing. I haven't traded it for a long time, Palladium. But yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic market back here. This is where I first started trading Palladium. And I think I started trading it because somebody mentioned it on a live webinar back then. And I'd never looked at it at all much before 2018. So I started trading it and it was absolute fantastic trend, you know, longer term positions, adding positions, all of that. But at the moment, it's a bit sideways for me, Palladium. So it just needs to make its mind up. That's the big picture for Palladium. There's absolutely, if you thought that Palladium was going to go higher, it's absolutely an interesting time to buy, because for me, I'd have a stop below those lows from August last year, 836. So what's that? It's an 86-point stop. You know, if it runs back up to October highs, that's like $300, 300-point move. It's good risk reward, isn't it? Let's say you put your stop loss, I don't know, no, it's more than 80. Let's say you put your stop loss at 800, 150 points risk, 300 points profit. It's an interesting trade. But yeah, but for me, it's still a bit boring overall, Palladium. But let's see what happens. Can we have it? Delta Airlines. Nice spike in Delta Airlines. Hang on, I'm on the wrong thing here. Delta Airlines. There we go. Oh wow, is that earnings? Is it? I would buy it, but I wouldn't. I'd probably wait for things to calm down a bit. So they beat earnings, didn't they? That's a great trend, wasn't it? It's a bit. I mean, it's a funny old trend, that actually. So it's like a really gradual trend from September 22. That would have been a great buying opportunity if we can get in our time machines and go back, buy the dip back there. I mean, it'd definitely be one for next week for me to see, right, if it calms down, where does it all calm down? You know, it closed on Wednesday at 61, so it's opened at 67, so it's up 10%, isn't it? So for me, yes, I would wait to see what happens, and then maybe next week be a buyer. I mean, it's broken out through some big levels as well, isn't it? So it's broken out. So is that all-time highs for Delta? I've only got data going back to 2009, but it could well be all-time highs for Delta. And it was making all-time highs here anyway. So anyway, let's see. So yeah, so I could be tempted to be a buyer and probably have a stop the other side of 55, I think. So I think that is an interesting one for next week. Johnson & Johnson, J&J. From memory, these were in a big downtrend, but let's see. And they are, aren't they? Did I go short them last year? I don't think I did. But I was thinking about it, but I didn't do it. Anyway, big trend is down in Johnson & Johnson for more than 2 years now. So really, I'd much rather be a seller than a buyer. I suppose, you know, an aggressive trade here, it's a bit like the gilts trade, but not quite as drastic as the gilts trade. You know, it's broken what were big lows, this whole 144, 142 area. So you could take the view, they've got earnings next week by the looks of it. So you could take the view, has it overshot and I want to be a buyer? So that's an interesting aggressive trade. They've got earnings coming out whenever that is. I can't see it. 22nd of Jan-ish. So that's another one. So me, textbook, I'd much rather sell a rally in Johnson & Johnson. It'd have to be a big rally though. An aggressive trade, be a buyer with a stop somewhere the other side of whatever the low is so far. 140 or something like that. But yeah, I mean, that has been a good downtrend. It's almost textbook, that downtrend, isn't it? That was a brilliant short. That would have been in September. Lovely. So yeah. How will the markets react to Trump's invasion of Greenland? What's the main... I mean, it's not going to happen, is it? Because already I think the Danish... I mean, not that we think it's going to happen, but the Danish Prime Minister, I think, came out with a statement saying that obviously we don't want to get into a stupid discussion about this, but, you know, we are going to step in and sort things out. And of course, there are other allies as well, aren't there? I think, you know, so... yeah, I don't think we're going to see a war. Famous last words. I mean, anything could happen, isn't it? But, yeah. So what natural resources does it have, though? I'm trying to see. World's most sparsely populated territory, 56,000 people, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But, yeah, it just gives us a taste, perhaps, of some of the fun to come in the year ahead. So let's see what happens. So diamond, you said diamond. Somebody said. Do you mean? Is there a diamond index? I don't even know what it is. So if you can explain what you mean by diamond. There's a diamonds index. Oh, it's a Russia diamonds index. Oh, there's not exactly what you call a lot of data. So I'm a bit lost on that one. So yeah, don't know what that is. Lean hogs before Chinese New Year. I wouldn't trade off something based off Chinese New Year, to be honest, or any country's New Year. But lean hogs, I have looked at this in the past. Lean hogs, another one, absolutely great downtrend in lean hogs, going back to June 21. So we're 3.5 years into that. So I would be a seller of strength on lean hogs based on the daily chart. So for me, again, that was a good trade. The short there in April last year, short the pigs. Yeah, so for me, the trend is down. I would be a seller, if anything, of lean hogs is what I would do. I suppose if you want to be a buyer, trying to call a bottom, a stop the other side of the low for this week is maybe one idea, but I'd much rather sell a rally in lean hogs. So yeah, that's that. Turnaround by Valaris, V-A-L, Valaris Limited. Oof. Oh, I'm not sure about that. I would go short, I think, Valaris still. I would be absolutely, yeah, I would go short Valaris. So what do they do? Industrial services. So it's a big slide, isn't it? So they touched 84 in the summer and then they've gone to 40 in December. So for me at the moment, I would treat this as a bit of a dead cat bounce and look to sell a rally. I mean, you could take the view, you could, as ever with markets, I think again, one of the mistakes we all make in the beginning with trading is think that trading, there are absolutes in trading. And of course there aren't, it's all shades of grey. So you can absolutely make the argument to be a buyer of Valaris because we're back near those lows from July 2022. So if I was a buyer, I'd have a stop the other side of $37. But at the moment, I would be tempted to think that the downtrend is not over. So I would be tempted to be going short, if anything, on Valaris rather than being a buyer. So let's see what happens. But it's an interesting one to watch, though. That was a great trend on the way up, wasn't it? So it went from, in 2021, went from $22 to 84 by 2024. Great return. So, but for now, yeah. Let's come back to it though, at the end of the month or something, or in Feb, and see where everything is. Can we have a look at Meta, the old Facebook? I thought it was interesting, wasn't it? That news this week that they're getting rid of fact checkers. And again, not being political about it, but I mean, it seems like a massive move by Meta to, ensure perhaps a bit of favour with the new president, I thought, so interesting. But there we go. So, and saying, that they'd been too, whatever it was, I don't know what the word was, too left-wing when it came to monitoring the facts, whatever. But I thought it was interesting that Meta did that. What does market think? Okay, I would be a buyer of Meta. Yeah, so again, I'll be a buyer of Meta. Let's have a look at Apple in a minute, actually, as well. Buyer of Meta. The only question, I'd wait for it to stop dipping, and then I'd be a buyer. And the closest I have my stop, the other side of 549, I probably want it further away than that. So a deeper dip would not be bad at all for me. So the trend is still up and all of that. Oracle. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? Oh, let's have a look at that. So clearly we've looked at this before because I've got these old lines on it. Let's have a look at that Oracle. I'm back into trading US stocks this year as well. I'll have a look at, I'll show you the ones I've got open at the moment. Again, that for me is a buy the dip because the trend is up from October 22. So we're 2 years into the trend. It's still weak, so I wouldn't buy it yet. But that's an interesting one, again, I think, to come back to see what happens. What happens in the next week or so. Do we see a bit of support at 150? I think that's an interesting market, Oracle. Is it big database, software-y, doodah stuff, isn't it? All of that. So let's see. Apple I was going to look at. I thought Apple was a buy when it stops dipping. Let's see if it has stopped dipping. Oh, not yet. That's another one, actually, like Meta. Unless, of course, suddenly we're seeing a change in direction for stocks, and nobody ever knows. So for me, I've got to go with the trend. I think Apple's an interesting stock for next week. Where does this weakness stop? But let's have a look at the indices in a minute. Clearly, they're taking a bit of a battering today. Still, they are. Let's go back. Let's have a look. Hang on. Let's see what's going on. Oof, interesting. Oh, big level coming up on the S&P and the Nasdaq. I'm guessing the Nasdaq's through the big level. So the Nasdaq is back to November lows, like a knife through butter. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Interesting to see if this is actually all overshot, and do we get a bounce? I would still buy it. Could be an interesting afternoon. It's just faffing around, isn't it? Those lows in December. Let's see. So that was Apple and Meta. I said I'd talk about the stocks I'm in. I bet they're under a bit of pressure though. Visa and that's taking a bit of pressure at the moment, but again, trend is up. Blah blah blah. ANET, Arista, I bought them just before the all-time highs, so that looks like it's back to break even for me. And Nick's favourite, Costco, bought those. Oh, not that one. Bought those the other day. Sorry, Costco. Where is it? And that's Connect. That looks like it's back to pretty much where I bought it. I bought it on Wednesday. So that looks where. Okay. Let's see. Interesting afternoon though. What's the Dow doing? So the Dow is back to pre-election, pre-US election levels. The Dow is right on its trend line now. Look at that. That's it. I'm calling the bottom for the Dow in 2025 today. Yeah, it's going to be all plain sailing up from here. I'm of course not being serious, but interesting to see what happens. We're on that trend going back to October 23. Yeah, I think we're in for an interesting week next week, given all of this, and an interesting finish to today. So let's see what happens. BTI, someone said BTI, British American. Is it British American Tobacco? I've got those. I've got the UK listing of those. Good dividend payer. I should have got that them ages ago though, but I'm still in them. Let's look at the UK listing, because I think it makes perhaps clearer. So the UK listing, I bought them in here somewhere years ago in my ISA, rode them up, forgot to get out, rode them all the way back down, and they're back up again. I think it's interesting because the trend that had been down since June 22 looks like it broke last year, and we're in this new recovery trend. So I would be a buyer of BATS/BTI, but I'd rather have a deeper dip, and again with a disclaimer that I do own the shares anyway. I'd rather have a deeper dip, but I'd be a buyer, and it's quite interesting because it's quite a good dividend payer. Excuse me, as well. So yeah. Well, there we go. This is the most interesting things have looked in an awfully long time, it feels like. So let's see where it ends. But we'll wrap things up there. So for the rest of today, if you've got nothing better to do, personally, I'm rewatching Tales of the Unexpected from the 1970s, if you're old enough to remember that, on Amazon Prime. But I'll keep an eye on these markets. Interesting to see what happens with these markets down here on these old lows. Let's see what happens, and loads of other stuff to look at next week anyway. I'll do that long-term webinar next week. It'll be well worth your time. If you're in the WhatsApp group, you'll be on it anyway. But if you want to see it, either join the WhatsApp group or try out my preferred broker. All the links are in the description down below. Otherwise, we will wrap things up there. Interesting rest of the day ahead. Interesting week ahead next week. Any questions, feel free to drop me an email. There's my email address, dj@davidjonestrading.co.uk. And that's it. Good luck with your trading, and see you all hopefully next Friday, and we'll see what things look like then. Okay, thanks very much. Do, do, do.